All right. Welcome. I don't know why I always do that. This is Louis Brantmeyer, the owner of the conference call line on which this is recorded. And you have just stumbled upon Clever Orbits, our amazing, wonderful, lovely, and fun Star Trek podcast. I am your host, and here are the other hosts. Who wants to go first?
Tyler. Are you
Richard.
advertising for Stumble Upon and other things?
No.
Never mind.
Stumble upon.
It's being clever.
It's just something that we stumbled upon. The person who is listening to us probably stumbled upon this. Yeah. Okay. And then our other co-host,
Richard Futrell.
All right. Yeah, that's Richard Futrell. Welcome, Richard. Today we are talking about Star Trek The Next Generation, Episode 1 of Season 7. It is called Descent, Part 2. And it's about data, it's about the Borg, it's about lore, it's entertaining. So who wants to start with the summary, and then we'll start chiming in with our thoughts, feelings, etc.
Wow.
Right.
Don't everybody talk at once.
Got this, Richard?
Starts off where we left off last time, where Data sort of started going crazy around the Borg and feeling emotions, and he went down to a planet, and Picard and the gang all followed him there, and turned out Lore was there with him on the planet with a bunch of renegade Borg who appeared to have individuality and were following Lore. That's the episode. That's the summary of the last time on. So, the first scene, what exactly was the first scene?
I think they were talking to Lore in front of a bunch of Borg. Like, I believe that was it.
Yeah.
I can't remember, though.
Talking to Lore, and then Lore has Data take
Picard and
Geordi, and
their prisoner, and
Lore has Data take them all back into some sort of prison area.
Yeah. I remember that.
And so now we're in the state of being worried about what Data's going to do, and maybe his new persona where he's kind of mean and subservient to Lore is actually just his natural evolution. I don't know. And this is quickly resolved, though, because once Picard and Geordi and the gang are in the prison.
Wait, you skipped ahead. You skipped ahead a little fast.
Okay.
So, one thing that gets brought up is they talk about, together we will destroy the Federation. And then that never gets mentioned again. Promptly forgotten. It's kind of like one of those vague threats that you're like, well, that sounds bad, and then they're just kind of not interested in that. One thing that is interesting, though, that they talk about very early on is how Lore and Data talk about, all right, this is the end of biological life forms, and the age of completely artificial life has begun. And there's this whole notion throughout the episode of Data and, specifically Lore, his idea being that the Borg can evolve into a completely synthetic form. As if being organic is just not good. I think that's an interesting idea. I don't think it was very well articulated or very well explored. I think that later on in the episode, when you get the stuff with Geordi, the work that's being done on Geordi, the aim and intent of those experiments is very perfectly aligned with this whole idea of all right, we're going to transform you neuron by neuron into something that we can replace you, portions of you, whatever, with artificial components. And that's basically a lot of what happens with the Borg. That's kind of the notion of the Borg, is that biological life by itself is kind of inefficient, not as efficient, or not as powerful as it could be. So what we're going to do is we're going to augment it. When you get assimilated, nanoprobes get put into your bloodstream in order to augment, improve, and transform your biological organism. So the whole idea of the Borg is really that there's something missing from biological life that will bring it closer to perfection, which is very interesting considering, like, when somebody gets assimilated, like turned into a Borg drone, there's suddenly this hodgepodge mix of hybrid of however efficient and effective and powerful and intelligent that species innately was, and then however it's been enhanced. So, like, it stands to reason. I mean, it's an interesting philosophical direction we can go. You find out later that the Borg were all messed up on this one ship, which looked kind of crazy to begin with. You guys have seen the ship, right? The Borg ship from the episode?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a Borg cube. It looks kind of like a Borg, I don't know.
Ship.
It's
a regular
still geometrical.
Polygon.
Yeah, it's a polygon. It's still geometrical, but it's very different from Borg ships that we've seen previously. So anyway, the Borg on this one ship were affected and impacted by Hugh's return, and they were less chaotic, and they were in need of someone's help. So they stumble upon Lore, and Lore's like, hey, I've got, and he must have thought to himself, how can I get power in this situation? Well, if I tell them that I can help them to evolve, and that, the next evolution is to eliminate their organic life components, then I've got something to say. I've got a direction that I can take them in. I think it was really just a self-serving kind of thing that he created. I
got the sense that Lore didn't really know what he was doing, and he just wanted power, and he wanted it to keep going, and he came up with this artificial life, concept. And really, he just wanted, I think it's particularly clear in the part where one of the sort of dissident Borg are talking to Picard, or talking to the crew that's looking for Picard underground with Hugh. And they say, at first Lore promised us power, and then he started demanding more and more sacrifices. Lore is like a sort of cult leader that doesn't know exactly what he wants to do, and it's just becoming more and more pathological.
Yeah. Yeah, and then eventually, like, by the end of the episode, he's like, in order to prove my dedication to this cause, I will kill my own brother. Kind of like...
the cause is degenerating more and more into loyalty and nothing else.
He's not the most interesting character, Lore, or at least he's not drawn the most interesting.
We can talk about the very end. He might be interesting.
He might be, he might be with what he kind of... You're talking about when he says, I love you?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like something going on there. Maybe there's hope. Maybe he's a cool guy.
At first when I saw that, I thought it's just a trick. But maybe in fact the reason Lore keeps on pulling Data in is that on some level he loves him and he just doesn't know how to show it. He doesn't know how to bring him in other than with these sort of pathological schemes.
I do think to some extent he's insane. Like, I think he's just, he's not got any coherence. I mean, he's got some coherence to execute his schemes, but, like, he's not, like what are Soong-type androids meant for? How do they really work? Like, Data has some measure of self-determinacy. Lore also, but Lore doesn't really seem to be interested in improving himself in any particular direction. Like for Data, it's really weird that the direction that he picked was to be more human. I'm pretty sure his creator wasn't like, hey, I'm going to make you this way, and I want you to be more like me. Like, I mean, he just happened to be somewhat like a human already. So for Lore, I don't know. Like the real question here is, given artificial intelligence, what would it do with itself? Like what direction would it take? And for Lore, we see that he hungers for power. For the Borg, they were longing for coherence. They were looking for a leader. So they just took the first one that came along.
Yeah.
And like also with the Borg, it's this interesting connection between it's organic matter and beings regulated by an artificial intelligence, ultimately regulated by a really complex programming set. Like, and this is part of why people...
I'm not so sure they're regulated. I mean, they talk about sort of, they all just think as one. So it's not so much that the software is regulating them, it's just the software enables them to just be one big organism. So
the software is them, probably.
Yeah. Or it's it's like their cells in a human body.
Oh, interesting. They're constituted by that. Or they're coordinated. So it's a much more subtle and intricate relationship than, for example, is portrayed in the movie. Well, maybe they were trying to capture something subtle and intricate with First Contact, but they didn't quite do it properly. I don't know. We could talk about that when we get to it. Anyway, so what happens next? So there's the artificial intelligence thing. Then they're put into prison, right? Like you were talking about. Oh, and Beverly Crusher is in command of the Enterprise. How was that? What did you guys think of that?
I honestly didn't get anything out of that whole B plot at all.
Same here, save for the appearance of James Horan, who plays like a bunch of characters in Star Trek.
James Horan?
Yeah, he plays Future Guy in Enterprise, and he plays another character, I think in an episode of DS9, I can't remember.
Wait, that guy was Future Guy?
Yeah.
That smug son of a bitch who just, like, got pissed off at this ensign trying to help with Future Guy?
I don't know, just have to make sure my calculations are accurate. Yeah, that guy.
That's funny. That's funny because, like, they must have put his voice through a voice changer.
Clearly.
I like him. I really liked him. I mean, he was a great character. He looked he's got kind of a sharp, angular face. Yeah. Okay. So that was a nice surprise. Yeah. It's not really a compliment. It's just kind of like noticing what's going on with his face. So on the planet, we've also got Riker and Worf kind of isolated, looking around, and they encounter Hugh, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hugh comes
Hugh
back.
was kind of pissed off. Hugh kind of blamed
Hugh was
them.
angry at them. That was very interesting. He said, "You can't imagine how miserable it was for us after having been coordinated like that on the Borg not to have a leader." And that was kind of cool because, we think, individuality good. That's right. You think, hurrah, individuality. But it turns out for the Borg, it was the worst virus of all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
they don't know how to take care of themselves. Yeah.
It must not have spread to the whole collective. Well, I guess we said this in the near the end of the last episode. Like, it couldn't have spread, because if it spread, then, like, they would have been screwed.
Maybe intergalactic war.
Yeah, between different factions of the Borg. Totally.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Nobody would.
I guess, wouldn't that be a funny outcome if it caused much more damage and destruction than any other possible course of action? How would Picard feel about that?
Yeah, that assuredly was not what he intended. I mean, it was mostly a matter
I
of...
liked the encounter with you.
Yeah, it was good. It was really well done. And bad things happened afterwards.
Yeah. So I guess, like, the main sort of plot, the sort of micro centerpiece of the plot is that Lore is coercing Data into doing this, like, brain experiment on Geordi, where he replaces Geordi's brain with an artificial brain, and there's a high probability of failure. And it's very poignant because, Data and Geordi are friends, but Data said he would kill Geordi to feel emotions, and it's really quite disturbing. And
it's funny how they followed up that threat with an actual, like, execution of him basically being about to kill Geordi.
And I think it's pretty clear that Lore is just having him do it in order to test his loyalty. But because why take Geordi first, right? But and the other issue is that Geordi determines using his visor that Lore is controlling Data with a carrier wave, and so that sort of immediately dispels all the tension around maybe this is Data's true form, because that was actually just Lore controlling him. And so there's a bit of a plot around will Data actually kill Geordi, and how will they destroy the carrier wave, and that's sort of the main impetus for what goes on.
Yeah, so they're basically for this episode trying to kind of rescue Data from Lore's clutches, and then free themselves as well. And Worf and Riker are just kind of trying to deal with Hugh, and Beverly Crusher's trying to figure out how it works being in command. I think she's decently effective. I think she accomplishes what she accomplishes by a series of, like, happy accidents. Like that metaphasic shielding thing worked, luckily. It was an experiment.
Also, it only took 2 button presses to do it. It's like Geordi's experiment on the computer, and actually implementing it
just
would be
there.
days and days of work and theory and equations, but they just press a button and activate the experiment.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. So anyway, okay, cool.
One scene I liked was the one where Data goes to Lore to report on progress with Geordi. And
his ethical subroutine has just been reactivated.
Yeah. So it's so Data, it doesn't show it explicitly, but he hasn't actually destroyed Geordi's brain. And Lore sort of picks up on that and says, "Okay, well, I'm going to withdraw your emotions." And you see Lore move up his fingernail and press a button inside, which I guess controls the carrier wave. And then Data starts having withdrawal symptoms, and it's very disturbing. And and this is the moment where you see sort of Lore at his peak, sort of cult leader persona, when he's literally controlling it looks like he's controlling these people with drugs. And it makes me wonder if maybe he wasn't piping emotions into Data and then turning him off in that moment. Maybe he actually was actively piping pain into Data in that moment under the guise of taking away emotions.
Is pain an emotion is the real question, or can you use it as a...
The way Data was experiencing it at that point was certainly an emotion. And it's also worth wondering if maybe, is Lore capable of giving Data other positive emotions, or is it only this, pathological, whatever it is, that he gives Data that's possible?
Maybe his choice.
It's
maybe the emotions...
because the emotion chip definitely has more to it than just anger and stuff, as we know from First Contact. From Generations and First Contact. So anyway, he's just choosing his emotions, and yeah. So go ahead. You were saying. Sorry.
I said my piece.
Oh. Well, thanks for speaking. Thanks for saying your piece. I was going to say that the inconsistent portrayal of Data, right? Suddenly he's aligned with Lore. I don't really buy it. I think this episode was wounded by... I mean, the very thing that made the last episode great, which was Data's sort of self-consideration and inquiry into what's going on with me. This is screwed up. How do I deal with this? It's followed by him suddenly not being very thoughtful, suddenly being taken in completely by Lore's ideology just because of the emotional stuff.
And the carrier wave.
Yeah, and the carrier wave. So
a lot depends on that carrier wave to make this episode work. It is a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, maybe it's just the carrier wave. Maybe the carrier wave is a special Zoom type Android thing that happens. If you have access to that carrier wave, you can just make Zoom type Androids go somewhat messed up. Crazy. I don't think that it works 100% though. Because he's still using the carrier wave, or maybe it's sent intermittently. I mean, you could see him when you...
No, it has some kind of subtle behavioral effect, but not enough to make Data kill Geordi.
Yeah. So, and then another question is how does Data feel emotions? I mean, what does it actually mean for an Android to feel an emotion? Are they really subtle programs that have heuristic algorithms for repeating in a relatively unpredictable manner? Or are they, how would you write a program to cause a program to have emotions?
What is it like to be a bat?
Yeah, what's it like to be a chair?
Well, that's less interesting. But yeah, what is it like to be a bat?
I figure something like emotion that's like when your physiology is affecting your brain in some ways. Like when you're angry, your heart rate goes up, and your brain, your thoughts start to get sort of more angry and less coherent. You can imagine simulating that in an Android body by upping the, speed of the metabolism, such that it has some effect on the brain.
Huh. So okay, I think probably what it is, it's introducing a measure of, and this is how data experiences it. This would totally make generations like legit. Is it introduces a sort of chaotic and an unstable element into his behavioral programming. Like it literally adds chaos and like formalized chaos, because happiness is different than disgust, is different than fear, right? Like it's why the emotion ship is so kind of dangerous. It's because data operates in a more or less linear, rational, consistent manner until emotions get involved, which might actually even redeem the episode. That line of thinking and his portrayal of the character is like, or Brent Spiner's portrayal, the writer's articulation of data in this episode, really. Like, if emotions just make him unstable and chaotic, really, then maybe he acted the way that he did because he was being kind of just unstable and chaotic. Maybe it didn't need to be a coherent result of a rational thought process. Does that make sense? No. That's a way of seeing it anyway.
I don't know.
It's no battle at some point.
What's that?
Data's emotions do certainly seem to be chaotic.
Yeah.
There's like idea throughout Star Trek, starting with Spock, that emotions are, illogically irrational, and I'm not sure they really make that case beyond just defining them to be not rational or not logical. But in Data's case, it certainly seems that emotions come with a certain degree of chaos.
Yeah, because he's basically an infant when it comes to that kind of development. Emotional immaturity is very apparent. He doesn't know how to deal with them.
He doesn't really know how to react to these experiences he's having in his body, or for him. So for humans, emotions are fundamentally an embodied experience. They're accompanied by, facial expression, tone of voice change, compression in different parts of the body. Like, imagine being angry. Your brow scrunches, maybe your fists clench, and he could simulate those, but there's also the experience from the inside of like pressure, and it doesn't feel good to be angry. Like, I'm not sure. Do you understand what I'm saying? Kind of.
Depends on the circumstances.
Yeah. So like, anyway, he doesn't feel the feeling of it, so it really must just be a simulate. Anyway, I mean, this is an interesting. I'm sure someone somewhere's written a phenomenology paper about this, and we don't necessarily have to. Fun time. So, my next note was Borg shut themselves down in isolation. Borg suicide. Yeah. It follows from how interwoven they are from the collective. I just thought it was interesting that the Borg even have that function. Like, I can shut myself down as a Borg when the situation gets really bad or something. Yeah. And the fact that it's a function of them feeling isolated from the collective. Like, it says something about their culture. Like, they're always hearing each other's thoughts. They're never alone. It's an experience that some people here would probably like. I mean, in some sense, that's the solution to like existential crisis. Is like, if you've got
becoming the Borg.
Not becoming the Borg, but not being alone. Like being in conversation with someone else, and so the Borg have the maximal optimized experience of that, where like they're always in communication with other people. They're never.
It's true, and I think that's why the Borg are interesting, because they're sort of part of the ideal of the Federation is that it's some kind of utopia, and the Borg sort of raised the possibility that maybe this is actually the utopia, and even though it seems extremely disturbing.
Well, there's this really great nexus for exploring like individuality versus community, for technology versus organic matter. They're a really great node, to use their term, for conversation and interaction. I thought this was funny. So I'm not sure if you guys remember, there was a Borg who was guarding them, right?
Yeah.
In the prison. And they dupe Borg into thinking that Picard is ill, so the Borg leans over. And two things I noticed. One, he's like all Borgs, he's got an eyepiece, except his is pretty shitty. It doesn't actually cover his eye, like it surrounds his eye, and it's kind of like, well, why do you even have it then? And then number two, Picard. Okay, so he was Locutus and he knows the Borg, but Picard basically pulls out one tube and the Borg falls. It seems like it makes sense that Picard would have been the one person who would be able to disarm a Borg with a single move, and the fact that the Borg have systematic issues like, I guess this shows up in First Contact too, where all we have to do is fire at this one spot, right? It's just, and maybe it's just that Picard happens to know those things that makes them weaknesses for the Borg, but it also seems like a bad design that they have issues like.
The fact that they have that kind of issue with robustness, also the fact that the individuality trick worked at all with Hugh. Like, you'd think that would be the number one thing that they can guard against.
Oh, yeah, that their programming would be ready for.
Yeah, that's like the first thing they do, right, when they assimilate someone.
They remove the individuality, yeah.
But, there's, that's sort of, that's okay. It's like they're optimized for robustness against different enemies than the Federation, so it's okay if the Federation can see certain, weaknesses.
Yeah. So here's something that I thought was kind of funny. It was worthy of like being made into an honest trailer segment. You know how Geordi tells Picard, he's like, all right, so we need to tech the tech, and can you mess with that tech to like do the tech thing that we need for getting Data, his ethical program back? You guys remember that?
Yeah. Katie on Pulse.
And then, then the Katie on Pulse, for sure. So there's this scene where Picard has the little device, and the camera stays on Picard, and he's like playing with the little device for like 10 seconds. It was just like, okay, I mean, this is pretty boring. Can we look at something else? So this is, and the honest trailer would be like 10 seconds of Picard fiddling. So anyway,
he earned this fiddling. 6 seasons in.
And then let's see, the Borg suits, right? The Borg, they wear this like black spandex stuff on which clearly other stuff is stuck. Like maybe it was just bad costume design, but I can't for the life of me think of a good reason why they would need to have that black spandex stuff.
It's to enhance their skin.
I guess. I mean, like, how?
In what way?
Maybe that spandex is replacing their skin at that point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're becoming plastic.
That I guess that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it makes enough sense. So
sure.
Yeah. Let's continue from that. Continuing from that onwards, I'm just going by my notes. Lore's body armor looks like it's made of foam.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I get the feeling
and then why is he
Borg
wearing it? Like, what is it to protect him against? He's got political control over the Borg. What does he think they're going to revolt? Do you think his brother's going to try to karate chop him? But then he's wearing it.
He does seem pretty insecure in his power.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that's just for his own.
Constantly asking for demonstrations of loyalty.
Yeah.
I think he might be afraid he's going to get overthrown.
He's insecure and insane. Yeah.
Yes.
I would agree with that. That makes sense. That fits. So
that's a terrible combination.
Let's see. What else was there? I felt like this episode was kind of a letdown compared to the previous episode overall.
I think that's frankly a pattern with all the two-parters.
Yeah.
The first part sets up some interesting problem, and the second one has the task of tearing it down.
That's right. So, like, the consequences that are explored afterwards don't really ever seem to live up to our expectations. Like, what would actually happen, like, all the questions that could get answered, or that are posed, where we come up with our own answers, feel like we could write better conclusions.
Yeah, potentially.
But, yeah.
So,
who knows?
So there was that. Let's see, what else do we have to say about this episode? Data's ethical program came back really quick, I felt like. Like it just switched back on. There was no reinitialization. There was like no reboot. Maybe the reboot happened instantaneously. Maybe all the programming happened without us seeing like a blue screen of death and then a resetting and then a Windows open. Does data run on Windows? This is the real question.
Yeah.
Why are we... Go ahead.
No, that was it.
I felt like it was a really good question possibly to ask, like, why are we spending so much time with Tate and was it John or James Horner?
Yeah.
Like, why are we spending so much time with them? It's just not they're not important.
The writers were hoping that would turn out more interesting than it did. That's okay.
Yeah, they're just there to support Beverly's turn at the helm.
Yeah.
In the chair.
Yeah, so that it's because all the other characters are down to the planet.
That's right. And 47 of them are left behind. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Oh, that was good. Yeah. Richard, you know about that, don't you? 47?
I know about it.
Yeah. It's a thing.
It sounded almost like you brought up the Tribble War to a Klingon.
I know
all about it.
I'm not interested in it. Not my favorite thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, this episode raises a lot of interesting issues that are fun to talk about. In itself, like the actual episode itself and its plot, it's a bit, a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah. It's not the best made. I thought there should have been, I agree with the Penske File guys, there should have been a scene where Geordi meets up with you. I mean, like... Yeah, that would have been good.
Yeah. I think that would have been
That would have been, like, really good. The writers really messed that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what were they even thinking? I mean, come on. So that was that. Well, yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. The ship controls are very pretty. That was a note that I took. I like the LCARS interface, apparently.
Also, the building they were in, that was used for the final scene in Star Trek 6. Well, not the final, but the
that's right. In addition to being in Power Rangers, as we said last time.
Yeah. So, yeah, they had making history in there. Brothers of Sung, Peace with the Klingons. A lot of cool things happening in that building, that one building.
Yeah. So you guys got any more to say about this one?
I have nothing more to say.
Had great moments, but ultimately I agree with Richard.
Yeah, that was as someone once said, as I find my experience of Memphis to be pretty well summarized. That was a thing.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
It was good. So what are we on to next week?
Next week, so we're going to do something a little different. We're going to watch the first scene from Emissary, because it's got the Borg fighting the Federation of Wolf 359. We're going to watch the last scene from Blood Fever on Voyager, which is the episode where the Borg first show up. So we'll critique whether or not that was as scary as the writers intended it to be. And then we'll watch Unity, which is where the Borg really show up on Voyager, which I don't think is the strongest Borg episode on Voyager, but it's an interesting take on them. And actually, it really is an interesting take on the Borg. So it'll fit right in with where we're going.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that's that. We thank you, our listeners, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Good luck.
You'll hear us next week.